Welcome to a Greater Reality Healing, Living, and Helping meeting. This program helps you to take higher energy paths after big changes and challenges. This can create quantum leaps in your learning, growth, enjoyment, and service to others. The evidence-based information and holistic resources in this program can help you optimally heal, live, excuse me, heal, live, and help no matter what your past or current circumstances. Disclaimer, this program is not designed to replace medical or psychotherapeutic care. The meeting includes a 3-minute message from Mark, a 30-minute interview with our guest speaker, 15 minutes of Q&A, and then 30 to 45 minutes of sharing groups. The first 2 parts are recorded, but the sharing sessions are not. And I'd now like to introduce Mark Pitstick, MA, DC, who will interview our guest speaker. Mark has over 50 years of experience helping many people in hospitals, pastoral counseling settings, mental health centers, holistic health clinics, etc. To learn more, visit soulproof.com/about. His ebooks, audiobooks, audio programs, and documentary film are free at soulproof.com/shop.
Thank you very much. And so you'll let people in now?
2 goals from Raul Jimenez to put the 2 up. So we're coming back into it.
All right. Well, if you're not muted, please do so. And welcome, everyone. And if your video is not enabled, please do if you can. We'd love to see your shining faces. And can we figure out where the background noise is coming from?
That's it. That's the full-time whistle there.
Please mute yourself.
You should have a way to mute them. Right? Yeah.
Jen, you could kind of go through, and anybody that's not muted, do so. Looks like we got it. All right. So again, greetings, blessings, welcome to you. Please have a pen and paper or device to record. And a little later, I'm going to share some key article numbers, and also so you can record your questions for the guest speaker as he speaks. But first, I want to share some foundational information, what this is all about. And if you've heard my introductory remarks before, please learn them more deeply so you can teach others. First, the term greater reality describes all that exists, the totality of life. And synonyms for that are the big picture of life, the nature of reality, and how life is really set up. Now, you understand in the past, human understandings about this, the nature of reality, were heavily influenced by ancient and limited religious teachings about life, death, and afterlife. And also, fear-based and superstitious beliefs created more unnecessary confusion and misinformation. I'm not criticizing. I mean, a few thousand years ago, they were doing the best they could. You know, they don't have the evidence, the information that we have now. So now it's very clear, based on much scientific, clinical, and firsthand experience evidence, that this earthly experience is a totally safe, meaningful, and magnificent adventure amidst forever. And that means no matter what. You know, you had a child pass, you have cancer, you were molested, you're paralyzed, whatever. Those kinds of details, and I'm not minimizing your pain, and I'm not being glib, but those kind of little details in the big span of things are really inconsequential to the soul. You know, souls come here to grow, to learn. They're willing to go through adversity to do that, to serve others at higher levels. Souls aren't interested in things being safe, comfortable, and easy, like humans would prefer. So this Greater Reality program provides everything you need to help you know and show this great news. We have articles, videos, everything's free, meetings, sharing sessions, and follow-up support. Anyone who has questions, needs, you can email me, mark@soulproof.com. I get a lot of these every day, so my answers will be brief but information laden. Again, mark@soulproof.com. So all of that can help you heal yourself, no matter what your past or current circumstances, to live the greatest life you have envisioned, and that word "you" refers to your soul, your eternal consciousness, and to help others, and as a meta effect of that, our world. Now, this vision is so important because it literally has the potential to make our world a better place, to create widespread conscious living. That I'll say all this again. The Greater Reality Healing, Living, and Helping program provides evidence-based information and holistic resources to help you after any kind of loss and challenge. That can include the bodily death of a beloved person or pet, financial reversals, illness and disability, relationship breakups, lack of purpose, and more. I'm sure you know the list. Now, this may sound impossible, pie in the sky, but my training experience and many suffering and dying people have taught me a higher energy path that you can take after what seem like tragic losses. These people demonstrated how to have a breakthrough, not a breakdown. And with the information, resources, and support in this program, you can do the same. We'll help you do this, okay? This is a family, a community. Now, a moment ago, I said what seem like tragic losses, and this is a really important point to get, because most people are looking at life as though through a tiny pinhole, and then they wonder why things don't make sense. The brain and five senses, as marvelous as they are, detect much less than 1% of reality, what really exists. So that resulting optical delusion, as Albert Einstein put it, creates much needless pain, fear, loneliness, and other lower energy emotions. So the solution is to see things more clearly, to awaken to the big picture of life and realize how wonderfully and safely life is designed. For example, many of you are now grieving the bodily death of a beloved family member, friend, and/or pet. And if this is recent and raw for you, I'm sorry for your pain and suffering. The good news, though, is that I say bodily death because 99.9% of who and what they are still exists. Your loved ones didn't really die, just their earth suits did. And people from the afterlife, for example, after near-death experiences, come back and report, and they say, I know the humans spend so much focus on this body, but it's really as unimportant as a sweater you wore in grade school, really, in the big scheme of things. So very important to remember. Your loved ones could be right beside you while you're mourning their absence. In my Soul Proof documentary film that I created with my beloved Andy Lee, we interviewed a spiritualist minister, and he said, you know, it's kind of funny in a way. He said, I'll go to a funeral, people are around the casket crying and talking about how much they miss the person, and I'm over there talking to the guy. So that's the big picture of life. That's really what's going on. And the more you awaken to that, the more you're free, the more you can have peace, love, joy, gratitude, no matter what's going on around you. It's also important to know this big picture shows that you and their souls may have volunteered to experience challenges for the reasons I mentioned, to serve, have adventures, grow, and enjoy. The acronym is SAGE, SAGE training. And as you develop expanded understandings of life through a silver dollar size instead of a pinhole, you'll remember that this earthly experience is a blink of an eye in the span of eternity. So is it worth going through some suffering to grow and learn and serve others? Of course. You'll remember that you and your loved ones are soulmates who have been together before, will be again, and what's more, you're likely together right now in a different space-time slice of dimension that gets into multi-location and parallel realities, because it only takes part of who you really are, your energy, to manifest in this earthly experience. So that's a lot of deep information, I know. And let me show you now quickly some resources that will help you learn this at your own pace. So we're looking now at soulproof.com website. So here we are, first of all, under articles, the top tab. And I'll be listing some articles. Actually, I'm going to go through those right now. So the key articles to understand what I just went over are articles number 19, The Great News About the Nature of Reality, 75, about multi-location parallel realities, 80, Why Are You on Earth Now? Sage Training, 82, Greater Reality Healing, a higher energy path after life's toughest changes, because frankly, that's how most of us come to the party. You know, we're suffering. And when life is easy, you're probably not going to dig down deep and look at important questions, but when you're suffering, you will. It's just kind of human nature. 98, Life Between Lives. And finally, 108, Higher Energy Emotions and Ways of Being. So you can watch the recording if you didn't catch all those. The other thing I want to show you, the top tab is Shop. And this is where my 8 books and the free audiobooks and the ebooks available. And the first one I recommend, especially if you're new to this journey, the afterlife evidence right here. All the scientific, clinical, and experiential evidence that clearly shows no one really dies. And then 10 audio programs. And the most useful in the beginning are holistic breathing, great way to release old wounds, needless fears, and past information. Also, ask your soul angels in the light so you can quiet your brain and get in touch with your and their inner wisdom, guidance, assistance. And finally, the afterlife contact session, hypnosis, guided imagery to help you develop a different kind of, but very real and meaningful relationship with your loved ones who have passed. The last thing I want to share is the top tab Greater Reality program. And this shows the top tab, when are the meetings, how to join them, how to get automated updates, recordings, and all you have to do is click on that link. All we ask for is your first name and your email address, and I guarantee you that no one else will get it. And then also under the Greater Reality Program top tab, one's for healing, living, and helping. So this is where the videos are. So for example, for living, 2 30-minute videos to help you through that. So those are the resources that you need then, excuse me, to help you reach these goals, to take that higher path. So with that, I am honored to introduce today's guest speaker, Alex Burdyga, PhD. He's a volunteer team member for the Greater Reality program. Dr. Burdyga is a former cancer researcher and molecular biologist who spent his early career at prestigious institutions such as the University of Oxford. He strictly adhered to the materialist worldview until a profound personal and professional crisis forced him to address this question. What if ancient spiritual teachings were trying to describe advanced physics that we are just now beginning to understand? So he began applying his rigorous scientific training to the ultimate mysteries about the nature of reality itself. He analyzed evidence for 29 distinct fields. Wow, what an undertaking, from quantum physics to near-death studies, and utilized a panel of advanced artificial intelligence models to perform unbiased analysis using gold standard research methods. This approach uncovered a unified model of existence that bridges the gap between science and spirit. So he's going to share his findings with us and how those can help you optimally live, heal, help others in our world. So, Dr. Alex, thank you for joining us.
Yep, it's a real honor. Thank you so much.
I look forward to asking these questions of you and learning more. So, first of all, how about if we just drop the doctor titles and be Alex and Mike? You okay with that? Mark?
Absolutely, yeah.
So, first of all, tell us, please, how and when did you first glimpse that there's more to life than meets the eye?
Well, I'm a very analytical person, and so my background is research, academics, and long story short, I ended up learning some facts about quantum physics from an author I was reading. And at the time, I was trying to get personal development and mindset tips. And when he mentioned, and this is David Hawking's, one of his books, quantum physics, I had a lot of respect for the author, but I actually thought he must have made a mistake about understanding quantum physics because what he was saying could not be true. So I ended up digging into quantum physics to try to understand what actually were the findings. It cannot be possible what was stated in the book. And after a 100-hour deep dive into these fields, I found out that our bedrock science, describing the most accurate model of our reality, essentially says that one, it's dependent on our own observation. So before you look at something or measure something scientifically, it literally doesn't exist. It's in a vacuum of the quantum field. And even more astonishingly is the finding that everything in the universe is actually located in one place. That's called quantum entanglement, which means that even things which are 90 billion light years away on the other side of the universe are equally present here as my hand or my computer in front of me. So when I learned those two facts that, essentially the universe is non-physical until an observer observes it or measures it, and there is no separation, therefore there's no space and time. That completely destroyed my model of reality, which was based on materialism. And this is where I really had to dig deep and find out what's going on here. And this has led me
Okay.
down the rabbit hole, essentially.
Yeah, so before we get into that, and I certainly want to hear more about it, um, I've learned that many people who awaken later in life, and I hope you'll share your lucid dreams and all, but many of them look back and realize as a child they were different. They glimpsed some things, but they didn't pay much attention to it. They maybe even thought it was imaginary or silly. Did you recall something like that?
Well, yeah, actually, in fact, I would say a striking example is lucid dreaming itself. I had a few lucid dreams early on when I was maybe 15 or 16. At that time, I had no context for any of this research. And, the prevailing model of reality is that, your brain makes consciousness, therefore, what you dream is just your imagination. And therefore, when I had a lucid dream, I was like, well, this is fake. This is just my own dream. And so I willed myself up awake. Now, fast forward, 20 years plus, where I've done 2.5 years deep dive into the 29 fields of study, I have a completely different understanding of, or perspective or context about reality. So now when I start having lucid dreams again, I see them from a very different angle. So I think we do have a lot of experiences, but naturally, based on the prevailing model of reality that we already have, we can dismiss the data or we can label it as this or that. So I think a lot of people do, but they dismiss it as imagination, wishful thinking, or simply the mind just represses it back to the unconscious and you can't even recall it anymore.
So before we dive deeper into the science, share please more about the lucid dreams. I mean, as my understanding is that you were kind of taken around the cosmos and shown glimpses of how things are set up. Tell us more about that, please.
Yeah, so it was really handy. So about 2.5 years into the scientific deep dive into looking into mainstream objective science, as well as the subjective fields like near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, all this kind of solid literature. About 2.5 years into that, I suddenly started having spontaneous lucid dreams, about 10 to 15 per month. And because I'm a researcher at heart, I was able to use these to do experiments. So for example, in one of the lucid dreams, I said, I want to see my higher self now, and absolutely nothing happened. So I said it 3 times in a row. Actually, because at the time I was listening to a book by William Buhlman, who's one of his books is called Higher Self Now, and he was using this exact terminology to have an adventure. So I said Higher Self Now. On the third time, it suddenly worked. I went into a black void. Everything went dark, and suddenly I start hearing high definition music just all surrounding me. Such quality that, is hard to imagine on this end, shall we say, but there it was happening. And then suddenly, about 5 seconds into that, the music just faded out, and I started traveling very rapidly down what felt like a tunnel, shall we say. After about 10 seconds of sort of disorientation and not knowing what's going on, suddenly everything came to a stop. I was in a black void, and about 100 feet away, there was this sort of a oval kind of figure, which looked kind of luminescent with a slight outline of a face. And then, astonishingly, I was completely blown away by this whole thing, but in a very calm English, and telepathically as well, it kind of said, "Oh, in this dimension, we only use sound," or something like that. And now, if it was 20 years ago, without the context of everything I researched, I would have thought that this was just my imagination. But given that this really matched the very close profile of a near-death experience, where they have telepathic communication, traveling down tunnels, music coming from surround. So that was one experience essentially. But to this point, I've had over 400 lucid dreams. And in some, I've kind of asked or demanded to go places. A lot of the time, I will just experiment with the ethereal properties, shall we say. So I have had a lot of insights and a lot of confirmation of what other people report in, for example, near-death experiences and out-of-body experiences. But I would say my primary knowledge base still comes from studying the 29 fields, such as studying medical reports of near-death experiences. For me, it was more confirmation of what people report seeing on the other side. I essentially have experienced a lot of that with my lucid dreams as well.
Mm. So again, before we get into those 29 areas, what a mind you have, by the way. So my recollection is you contacted me about a year ago because you searched after all these lucid dreams and found that what I was writing about resonated pretty well.
Yes, that's
about
actually
that.
true. I am very honored to be on this program, and also I really appreciate it because Mark has incredible understanding, and the book he mentioned to read, what was the title again? Sorry, the Afterlife
Afterlife evidence.
Evidence. It's a short book, but it is absolutely fantastic and has a huge amount of detail in there. And so, yes, after my extensive research, the important thing for me is to try to get to the bottom of it, try to get to the truth, try to get to the most accurate information we have. And essentially, when I got to know Mark Pitstick and studied himself and his books, essentially the picture of reality and the knowledge that he conveys very highly aligns with what I have gathered from all these different fields and the model of reality which I'm kind of working with. So I just wanted to highlight that. Yeah.
Well, thank you. Hopefully I don't get a big head from that. I mean, I don't have enough hair as it is. So share, please, and keep it clear and understandable for the rest of us who don't have your brain and all your degrees. But yeah, so tell us about the bulk of research you did, the 29 topics, and what that points out.
Well, the idea is that if the reason why you want to look at more fields or more data essentially is that if you are consistently having a model of reality that fits the very large number of fields which have validated data, then the chances are you have an accurate model of reality. So if you have cross-corroborating evidence from more and more fields which are pointing in the same direction, the more confident you are. So I really started with quantum physics, but I already had some biology and some cosmology background. But essentially, when I started kind of going down that rabbit hole of near-death experiences, out-of-body experiences, terminal lucidity, it kind of branched out, branched out, branched out. And after covering a lot of evidence, at least in my case, I'm a very visual person. So I started to try to piece together, okay, how does this all fit? It's not a matter of listening to everybody. It's about trying to get quality data. But once you establish quality data from those fields, you try to understand how does it all fit in one coherent picture. And I'd say around about 2.5 3 years into the research, it started to kind of click. I started to feel like it's almost like this reality is a virtual reality like experience in which, consciousness, and at the base of it, we are essentially consciousness, is having a learning experience, in this case, through the physical form of a human body. And then I had some incredible synchronistic events, which led me to an arcade where actually I had a premonition a day beforehand, where my son was going to go on this virtual reality roller coaster. And he was going to, and I saw this one day in advance very clearly, that he was going to violently rip them off after 10 seconds. And that it was going to be my chance to put them on and have a look. And that was going to, give me some insight. And preceding that, about for a month and a half, 2 months, I was sort of really determined during my meditation walks to kind of say, please show me my higher self beyond form, beyond the physical form, what I really am. So that was kind of a mantra for a month and a half, 2 months. And then this premonition happens. And then we go to the arcade. And eventually I put on these virtual reality set of goggles. And as soon as I put them on, and it renders your hands like as virtual hands, all the fields I've been studying of the model of reality kind of clicked into place. Like everything fit into a perfect picture. And that's where the VR in consciousness model of reality was really born, because it's literally like this is a virtual reality like experience that's occurring in the one field of consciousness. And consciousness is the source, or what traditionally, religions would call God, but you can call it by any name. It is essentially the quantum field in physics. Yeah.
Okay, so most of us, things seem solid. It's what I was mentioning, the brain, the five senses report. Here's a solid body, here's a solid desk, and so on. And it also appears that we die, that we're separate from each other, we're separate from source. What does the VR and consciousness model indicate,
Yeah.
how things are really, what's really going on?
Well, this is the hardest part because as part of this experience, it's so well integrated that, the brain is designed to think dualistically. I'm here, you're over there, and the five sensory perceptions are um, they're very good, shall we say. But if we detach ourselves from perceptions, which is very, very hard, and we look at least at, again, evidence and data, the Nobel Prize in Physics in 2025, so literally a few months ago, went for definitive demonstration that nothing is actually physical. It appears to have physical solid properties, but when we actually bring it to a kind of a unique state, their physical properties go back to being waves, essentially, part of this one quantum field. And they're no longer physical, no longer, and neither are they in one place or the other. They just become pure potential again. But when an observation happens, they snap back together. It's called decoherence in physics. So the five physical senses say there's a real desk, there's a real computer in front of me, and there is as an experience, but it is not fundamentally physical. It is actually more like a experience that's informational, that's happening in the field of consciousness or in the quantum field. And through the body's five perception senses, it feels solid only because the body is subject to the same rules as the rest of the physical things around you. It's a little bit like when you put a virtual reality headset on and you have virtual hands, the computer program says when you touch the virtual wall, the virtual hands cannot go through the wall. That's the rule set. So in exactly the same way, what the data is showing us from physics, cosmology, and other fields is that the same thing is happening on a macro level, that your body is like part of this experience and it's subject to the same rules, including the five senses and your perception. But the real pilot of this body is consciousness itself. So you are the unique consciousness that actually is part of this field and it's having this experience, this unique experience of being a human, essentially, that is temporary.
Mm-hmm. So, as I've shared with you, part of the reason I'm so fascinated with what you're writing is that Dr. Gary Schwartz and I, 6 or 7 years ago, when we were writing our book, Greater Reality Living, discussed, okay, what's really going on? There are different models, religious and scientific and so on, but we agreed that of all the possibilities, that this earthly experience is most like a virtual reality experience. So can you because some people probably don't have any exposure to virtual reality. So you can say a bit more about that, please. And then, well, let's start with that.
Okay. The one thing that's really important to understand is that when we're talking about virtual reality, we don't mean that it's not real. Just like in ancient traditions, you're talking about Maya or dreamland or, oh, it's all an illusion. The context for that is that it is not fundamental. In other words, this physical reality is not some objective, independent rock somewhere out there and it exists on its own. It's again like an informational virtual reality like experience happening in consciousness or in the quantum field. So it's not to deny the experience. The human experience, everything we learn from it is of extreme value. And what research from, for example, life between life research by Newton clearly demonstrates that there's a reason for the purpose of incarnation, growth, and learning of that consciousness, the unique consciousness that you are. So it is not that it's meaningless or it doesn't exist. It simply is not how we think it is. The mind tends to think that it is a box, and within this box you have the universe, and that is whether you switch off the lights of consciousness or not, that box remains there. But really, what's happening is the other way around. This whole entire experience is a dimension that's occurring within consciousness, and it's compartmentalized. Like on the phone, you have multiple apps. Each app will open a different experience. It's kind of like what's happening in consciousness as well. It has the ability to generate experiences within itself, and it actually can have multiple parallel ones, which also explains why, for example, because consciousness is indestructible, essentially, when the human experience finishes, it just migrates to another part of consciousness, shall we say. There's complete conservation of matter, energy, but life as well.
So how do you look at now, you mentioned ancient religious teachings. What do you think some of these prophets, seers were glimpsing, Buddha, Jesus, and others? And how do you understand more now why they were sharing it the way they did?
I think this is the key thing, is that what they were saying was appropriate, I think, was appropriate for the times, for the language, and for the local populations. When you have, a culture that has very little education, is mostly farming food, you cannot use, non-linear terms, which are completely incomprehensible, even to the modern public, shall we say, they're not really familiar with this. So there was a lot of use of simple examples. There was a lot of analogies. And I think for that time, I think it was the best that they could do, shall we say. And it has made a large impact. But I think as we now move forward, we just have more data, more points of observation with which we can make a higher resolution sort of understanding of the actual greater reality which we're in. So, yeah, I think the use of, for example, Maya or dreamland in Buddhism was an appropriate term because I think that people could intuitively grasp it. Oh, yes, when I have a dream, it's like my own creation. And so this reality is like a dream. And with no technology like virtual reality, if you used anything like that, it would be completely without context. So I think those ancient teachings did the best they could with what tools they had, shall we say, and what the public understood.
Mm-hmm.
But yeah.
Okay. So you understand that many of our attendees are grieving right now. That's part of what brings them to search for more information, sensible information. Children pass, spouses, pets, which, many people are closer to their pets than most people, and that's understandable. What can you say based on everything you understand? Where are their loved ones now? What are their loved ones doing? What's the connection between these people on Earth and their loved ones who have passed on?
It's the best, so I'm working on a chapter that tries to explain exactly to help visualize. Okay, so my loved one passed away. I'm told that they continue somewhere, but it seems to be like, but where is it? You cannot see it, you can't perceive it. I think one way, at least to mentally anchor that, is to imagine that the field of consciousness, which is all that there is essentially, is like a very large flat ocean. And imagine you have ripples in that ocean. Now, our reality, imagine you cast a net that's like 100 feet by 100 feet on that ocean. It's like a little raft. Imagine all that we know is essentially like where that net falls on the patch. It's a small patch of that ocean. Now, but the ocean is infinitely big, or let's say very, very large, like the Atlantic. So our reality is like that one patch that we're aware of. But now imagine you have other patches which are beside it. So you have multiple nets cast on the surface of that ocean. What seems to be happening is that when the human experience is over, the consciousness which is fundamental is not created by the ripples on the surface in that particular patch where the net is. It just simply experiences it. But when the human experience is done, that consciousness can shift to other patches on the ocean to have other experiences. There is no, it's the shift in frequency or shift in dimension, as people say. And this isn't just a kind of fluffy talk. When we talk about solid uh, physics findings, we find that there's complete conservation within this field. It is impossible to lose anything, or even there's a wonderful thing called the no cloning theorem, that no part of the quantum field can actually be destroyed or cloned. So every part of this quantum field, which is also what I understand is to be the conscious field of consciousness, is actually eternal, unique, and essentially cannot be copied. It is fundamental to that field. So the loved ones you could visualize are like in a different patch of the ocean, which we don't currently have access to, but it's equally there. And the experience continues.
Okay, so how does this view help understand some people have visits, signs from their loved ones? How are their loved ones pulling that off from where they are or the form they're in now?
The one important thing to understand is that, again, if we look at for example, the definitive demonstration from Nobel Prize in Physics in 2022, which demonstrates that quantum entanglement is 100% true. So our universe, underneath our perception of 3D time and space, everything's completely interconnected. There is no separation whatsoever. Everything's instantaneous everywhere in the universe. But that, if we remember our ocean, and we remember the little ruffling patch, which represents our reality, it's interconnected not just everywhere within our patch, but everywhere across the entire ocean. So when you have these visitations, it seems like, well, where is it coming from? How can they even lock into us? Robert Monroe, who wrote Journeys Out of the Body, when he had over 500 spontaneous out-of-body experiences, once he became proficient at that, he would actually hold what he called mental ID. So he would hold the actual image or something unique to the person who he wanted to visit. And that alone, when he held it in consciousness, was like a unique IP address or unique address, which would just take him in his out-of-body state exactly to that entity or the person that he wanted to visit instantly. So when we have relationships and a loved one passes away, we have an ID. We already know each other. So on the other side, if they simply think of you, that instantly and automatically allows them to connect with you here. It's just that on our end, it's more like a one-way mirror where we have the veil where we cannot see them as well. But on the other side, things are a lot more dynamic and fluid. And this is, by the way, where my lucid dreams were very helpful at seeing how much more dynamic and responsive that environment is compared to our reality, which is seems a lot more mechanistic, shall we say.
Mm-hmm. Okay, so you examined all these different fields about this question, and then you used AI models. You know, AI kind of right now, it's like humanity has a love-hate relationship, and some people are afraid, some people don't understand it. Explain some, please, how you use that and your view on cautiously, judiciously using AI.
Yes, this is a very important part. So AI is not a magical oracle, and some people are misusing it already, texting with Jesus or whatnot. But I think from a scientific point of view, AI is one of the most profound tools humanity has ever had that is able to analyze data in very large amounts. And if used correctly, so like a thermometer, you can stick it in the sun, it gives you incorrect temperature. But if you actually know how to use the thermometer and you calibrate it, it can give you a very accurate reading of temperatures. And so AI is an incredible pattern recognizer. It's able to absorb data And then you can say, okay, I have this idea of reality and this idea of reality. Can you take that data and actually see how well it fits with one idea or the other? And so what I've devised using gold standard randomized double-blind multi-center approach, which is the gold standard research in clinical trials, is to apply this to AI in order for it to look at the data of quantum physics, for example, and then say, hey, look at the idea of materialism versus this reality is like a virtual reality in consciousness. Take those two models of reality. Now take the data from quantum physics and tell me which one fits the pattern, which one fits the data better. And you do this across 29 different fields. And then you combine the data and say, and the reason why this is so important is because for decades now, we have had a huge amount of data from a lot of these fields. And if we use logic and reason, the model of reality that emerges is that consciousness is fundamental, it's primary. And this is an experience happening, a temporary experience happening in consciousness. But the prevailing Western view of which is predominated by materialism model of reality, where it's an objective, independent world, whether you like it or not. The lens, when you view the data from that lens, they come with rescue devices. And so there's an argument between scientists. Some are using logic and reason and saying this is what the data is showing us, but the prevailing view is, well, this is impossible, therefore it must be wrong. And it's an ongoing debate that has no end. Where AI comes in, and I think is an incredible game changer, is that if you use it correctly, it doesn't have a personal belief system or a personal opinion. It's able to strip the data away and just use logic and reason and pattern matching to say, here's the data, here's the two ideas of realities, which one does it fit? And this really helps to end that debate. Because the debate will go on forever, and if you have 1,000 people signing petitions, it's materialism. Now it seems like it's equal weight. But when AI analyzes the data and says, no, materialism fits 10%, but this idea fits 90% using a scale. And this is independent of people's beliefs. This is just the data. And when you build that kind of across many fields, it helps to end the debate and to make a final decision. Yes, with the data we have at hand, it seems like the most logical and reasonable explanation by far to account for all the data is that essentially this is a temporary experience happening in consciousness rather than this is just a biological accident of a Big Bang universe.
Beautiful. Well, I want to open up the questions here in a minute, but first, and so those of you listening have your questions ready. But I mean, what a profound journey you've been on the last several years, and whatever you're comfortable sharing, how has it affected you personally and then also professionally?
Well, it's hard to almost imagine the difference. When I was younger, I always used to ask myself a question, well, if we're just here for temporary 50, 60, 70 years, well, if the universe is 13.8 billion years old, honestly, what's 80 years? Why does it even matter? Um, but, and to be honest, I wasn't even looking any deeper. Life kind of took me down this rabbit hole of quantum physics and everything else. But now that I've discovered this data and I've dug into it, and this is what appears to be the most parsimonious model of our reality, it completely changes it from, life is just a meaningless accident. At best, you could learn something interesting and then it goes out forever, to this is essentially evolution of consciousness that is having a certain phase, certain experience. First of all, it means something. Even when you have pain and difficulties, those are challenges with which you grow. Second of all, it's like, rock climbing with a safety harness. Even if you slip up and you screw up, the harness is going to catch you. So you can try again and again. You can keep learning. Learning this did not just change my life. It completely changed it for better than I can describe in my words. I mean, it's just one day is joy after another, basically.
Hmm. Hmm. Yeah, and I'm reminded the words attributed to Jesus, you will know the truth will set you free. So yeah, once you know basic things about life, you don't really die, you're part of source, there is a meaning, we get help, angels and so on, then we can relax, have some peace and joy and love, do what we came here to do. So all right, well, thank you for that. So let's open up to questions now. You can, well, that didn't take long. Justin, you're up. If you unmute yourself.
Thank you. Yep, I'm unmuted. It was great to hear everything Alex said. It fitted in completely with everything I've been listening to on a series of podcasts called the Telepathy Tapes, and I wondered if either of you had listened to those, because those tapes blew my mind, and everything Alex is saying just fits in with those tapes completely.
Yes.
I have not heard of telepathy. Oh, sorry, Mark.
Well, that's okay. Yeah, I've heard of them, but you go ahead. You're the guest speaker.
Yeah, no, I'm afraid I haven't heard of them, but I will certainly check them out. Um, yep.
Yeah, well, basically, working with kids who are on the spectrum, autism, many of whom are nonverbal, but in different ways, discovering that they have amazing abilities, be able to see, quote, dead people, knowing things, telepathy. I mean, and it's such a fascinating, it just corroborates everything you're talking about. Yeah, you'll want to check those out. Thank you for bringing that up, Justin. Anything else?
No, that's great. Thank you.
Okay, thank you. Gina, you're up there.
So I wanted to know how his ideas align with the idea of reincarnation.
Yes. So, reincarnation is basically the only way this experience is possible. It's not a one-time shot and then that's it. If we look from quantum physics and how the field is structured, right through to a very large amount of evidence from spontaneous past life recall in children and a lot of subjective data, that yes, reincarnation appears to be how it is happening. It is apparently very rare for a person to have a single incarnation and be done with it, but it appears, at least from the subjective fields, that the soul has choices as to what it's going to do next. And it seems often that a lot of souls end up having multiple experiences which require reincarnation, essentially. And it seems to be like you incarnate, you have a lifetime, and then you have a reflective learning period on the other side. You regroup, and then you come in again. There could be 10 years in between, there could be 100 years. And time is a bit more tricky on the other side, the linear time as we know it. So it's not exactly, but yeah. So it perfectly fits in.
Is
Thank
there a
you.
particular religion that aligns more with what you've with the data, with what you found?
Well, religion itself is trying to describe essentially the core spiritual principles on which they're based. So they have a different lens. And for example, I think Jesus once famously said that, Elijah has come back as John the Baptist. So even Christianity, there's still some hints of reincarnation there. But with heavy editing, later on, 300, 400 AD, a lot of this text just got wiped out, shall we say. Whereas obviously more the Eastern philosophies, Buddhism and Hinduism, this is part of the normally accepted sort of teachings. Now, obviously, the teachings themselves don't change reality any more than, whether we vote that Earth is flat or round, it doesn't change the shape that it's round. So it's always been that way. It's always going to be that way, shall we say. So religions have different ideas about how it works. But essentially, that's just the teachings themselves. What the data seems to be saying from modern subjects like spontaneous past life recall in children, in between lives from Michael Newton, is that reincarnation is what is actually happening, indeed, yeah, which is more aligned with the Eastern teachings.
Well, maybe we need a whole new religion based on the data and not the dogma.
Yeah, I mean, to be honest, the fascinating thing is that if we look at the core what religions are based on, the very, very core notion is really that there is only one consciousness, that you are consciousness, and that it's all interconnected in a way. That's the absolute core that unites them all, which then when you strip away all the other noise, what you're left with is one fundamental field of all power that's basically omniscient, omnipresent, and yeah, it's basically what we're part of. So, and it seems to learn through different experiences within itself, of which one, this is our virtual reality, like environment. Yeah. Hope
Okay,
that's not
thank you.
confusing.
Well, thank you, Maria. You're up next.
Hi, Alex. So this is a really interesting topic and it's fascinating. You mentioned that consciousness shifts to other nets and we kind of coexist and they're experiencing things in a different patch with obviously a different perspective. How do we connect to different patches existing all around us? How do
Well,
we
yep, go ahead. Yep.
No, that's pretty much, you mentioned lucid dreams, you mentioned, you know, nuggets that come down to us in your research is and people that have connected to the other side. What was the common denominator, or if there is one?
Well, no, there is a common denominator, and that common denominator is quieting down the brain. Essentially, if you look at meditation, if you look at evidential mediumship, if you look at past life recall in children below the age of 7, what the common denominator is that essentially the brain is down in alpha or theta state. In this state, whereas your normal waking state right now is beta state, that's your very active 13 to 25 hertz. When the brain slows down, so when you're doing meditation, when you're in hypnotic state, when you're having dreams and sleeping, when the brain is less active, the consciousness that is less engaged with the physical body and 5 senses and tends to spread out. We'll just use spread out. It's able to go past the limitations of the body and it's able to go further out. And so this is essentially how mediums are able to get that, information. They're not doing it in a beta state. They go into sometimes they can get into it in 5 seconds because they train themselves, but they'll drop their brain waves right down. And the brain acts like a filter, like a pair of sunglasses, which gives you a certain experience. When you loosen that filter, you are able to have a deeper connection. And so, for example, some people will have spontaneous spiritual experiences or simply meditation, and suddenly everything's fine, fine, fine. And suddenly their ego dissolves and they feel like they have a knowing that they're part of one with everything. A bit like Edgar Mitchell when he was coming back from the moon mission, he suddenly had a spontaneous spiritual transformative experience where he suddenly fused with the whole cosmos and he felt like he was interconnected with everything. Interestingly enough, Federico Fagin, who's the inventor of the microprocessor, had exactly the same experience, which he described in his book Silicon, where again, suddenly he just became one with the whole universe. And this happens when the brain is more quieted and your consciousness is able to then, it's almost like taking off the VR headset, your biological body headset, you're able to see the bigger picture. Same thing happens with psychedelics as well, for example. The brain tends to get quieter and there's an expansion of consciousness.
Thank you. We'll take 2 more questions and then we need to wrap up this part. We're going a little longer than we planned, but how do you turn this guy off? I mean, how often you get a chance. We appreciate your views so much. Andrew, you're up next, please.
Hello, Alex. I'm really enjoying reading your book so far. A couple of very quick questions. I hope you can answer them together. First of all, is there such a thing as absolute truth, and what's your understanding of that? And the things we learn and the wisdom we learn in this lifetime that we experience, are those things transferable to another field, if you want to put it that way?
Beautiful questions. First question is, I had a wonderful experience about absolute truth. I had a wonderful experience getting onto a state-of-the-art quantum computer, IBM quantum computers, which, believe it or not, how they work is they actually have 1 foot in our reality and 1 foot outside of space and time. They get into quantum superposition. It's unbelievable. And essentially, what they do is quantum computers don't compute. They don't sit there crunching numbers. They take your question, they put it into mathematical language, and then they essentially take that question and shoot it into the quantum field, which is outside of space and time. And then they immediately listen for the answer because the quantum field magically seems to give answers. And so when you ask a question, what is 2 plus 2? It's not a random noise. When you say 2 plus 2 equals 4, you have a massive convergent constructive interference. And the answer is the universe says, yes, that is true. When you do 2 plus 2 equals 5, nothing. Complete destructive interference within the quantum field. So at least from a mathematical point of view, is there such a thing as absolute truth? Or is truth and morality just figments of our imagination that we commonly agree on? No, the data seems to say there is absolute truth. 2 plus 2 is 4, not 5. And the quantum field within which our reality is occurring is very well aware of those facts. So, and are our skills transferable? Well, again, this is getting a bit more abstract, but there is complete conservation of information within the quantum field, within the field of consciousness. So everything that you learn is layered on top, like a 3D printer structure. You print on the bottom layer, then the second layer, third, fourth, fifth. So yes, everything that you learn, everything is incorporated into your consciousness. And that is a completely lossless system that you then take with you. And that's one of the whole points of this experience, it seems, from the data, is that you essentially, you become the expression of your experience. So you incorporate everything, and that is actually the only tangible thing you get to keep. It's like playing Minecraft. There's virtual coins and virtual houses. It's all worth nothing because it's virtual. The only thing you get to keep is the experience of what you've gained from it. So the only thing of value is actually what you keep. And yes, you get to keep it.
Hmm.
The data says that.
Thank you very much. Anna, you're up there.
Oh, Alex, this was amazing. And very scientific, but so easy to understand. It was great. It was really great. My question is that I had been told, and we hear that you come to Earth, like Earth is kind of like the bottom of the ladder, like the hardest place to be in the whole scheme of things in this dimension. And that we come here, we learn, and there's a lot of suffering, and it's all for our own good. What is your thought about Earth, being here on Earth?
Yeah,
in that context.
It's very interesting. Unfortunately, I cannot have personal subjective experience to verify that. I only have so much data. But what seems to be a very consistent pattern across quite a few subjective fields, like near-death experiences, spontaneous past life recall, life in between life research from Michael Newton, it seems to point that the human experience is indeed quite tough. There is physical pain and there's emotional pain. And apparently there are other patches on the ocean which are easier learning environments. But this particular experience is very tough and grueling. And so it appears to be, compared to others, a lot more challenging. So that's not something I can say scientifically we could measure because I don't have access to that. But from the subjective reports from many fields and thousands of patients under hypnosis or spontaneous experiences, that is the common picture that they seem to be saying. And the other thing they're saying is that although it's tough, a lot of more adventurous souls tend to choose this because the evolution it's faster essentially. Sometimes, I tell my son, don't touch the hot stove 10,000 times. Doesn't listen. Touches it once, learns it straight away. So sometimes physical pain, at least, brings conscious awareness faster. It seems like one of the benefits of this experience with the extreme mental and physical pain is that you get the lesson faster and you can see how it affects others faster as well. And that's one of the attractions, apparently, that the soul has towards this kind of learning environment.
Thank you. This is beautiful. I said only 2 more, but I know Nancy's going to have a great question.
Thank you, Mark. Thank you, Alex. This is fantastic. Thinking about a lot of the subjective experiences of people who have traveled or had lucid dreams or NDEs, they speak of love being the field. And I'm just wondering, does that word or that sense of a positive force for the evolution of consciousness come up in your research?
Absolutely. In fact, this is one of the most profound conclusions when, actually, I might as well briefly mention it just for the record. So this is what I'm working on at the moment. So it's the immortal player, why science and AI prove you are an eternal player and not a temporary avatar. And there's essentially the first part of the book is exploring the 29 fields. The second part of the book is then saying, okay, this is the model of reality. This is what's going on. What's the actual significance? What does this mean for you? And one of the stunning conclusions when we combine all the data is that it completely mirrors what the very high sages has said over the millennia, is that essentially, if you look at if you want to call all that is God, then God is peace and love and nothing else. from a scientific point of view, if you look at the quantum field or the field of consciousness, it essentially resembles the properties of peace and love. Why? Because before the collapse of the wave function, before you have the rendering of our reality, which is dualistic and separate, there is peace beyond all understanding, because there is no separation, there's no conflict, because it is already before any separation happens for a dualistic experience. So that's the peace. And for love, when quantum entanglement shows us that everything is completely interconnected, everything is one, everything is aware of everything. So yes, essentially what the conclusions are is that not only are you part of that, but essentially what the source of all that is, and that you're one with, is peace and love and nothing else.
Thank you.
And that's the lesson.
Thank you. And I swear to God, this is the last one, but I really want to hear Mark's question, given his background that I know about.
Thank you, Mark and Alex. So, Alex, special relativity. Okay, this not quantum physics, but relativity. Simple thing is special relativity. When you apply the equations for time dilation to light itself.
Yes.
Light, okay, people, in my opinion, misunderstand this concept I'm about to describe, and I want to involve it with your discussion. Light doesn't experience time itself, nor does it experience any space.
Correct.
So light itself, just by itself, according to the special relativity time dilation equations, doesn't experience time or space until you observe it. Relativity, this is the part that I think many people leave out. When you go to observe light, then you get space and time. Light has traveled across space, 13.8 billion years or whatever. And it is in that time and distance, but you don't get that until you observe something. So how do we observe? First off, I want to comment that our existence as a material existence is entirely based upon light. Atoms absorb light, emit light. Chemical reactions are all based upon the exchange of light in orbitals.
Mark, we need to
yeah,
get to
I know. I had to get that just set up real quick. I know we have time issues. So that being the case, with the collapse of the wave function based upon observation, which is the absorption of a photon, what I'm trying to get at is, in your models of describing reality, have you incorporated the concept of light itself not experiencing time or space until you observe it? And how does it fit in with this whole big picture of reality based upon the wave function that you have mentioned?
A very good question, and I'll try to answer it so that it's more relatable. Essentially, what he said is correct. So from the perspective of a photon, when it's emitted by the sun, even though it takes 8.5 minutes to travel from the sun to your eye, from a photon's perspective, it's happening in the same place at the same time. Which is where quantum entanglement shows everything's interconnected, and even time itself is not fundamental, because something happened 8.5 minutes ago is touching what's happening right now. It hasn't disappeared from the quantum field. Now, my understanding is that essentially light is skimming the surface of the ocean. It's operating at the boundary of outside of space and time and in space and time. That is why it doesn't experience time or distance, because it doesn't operate by that. But from our perspective within, it seems like it does, like a streak of a photon. Now, so essentially light is fundamental to the field itself, because it doesn't experience time nor distance. It is kind of ever present in the field. And the most interesting thing is that if we look at light and we look at mass, Einstein famously said that E equals mc squared. He essentially said that mass, light, and energy are the same stuff. Now, fundamentally, when you look at my physical hand, you say, well, this is a physical solid object. And this light coming from that bulb over there, it's like ethereal. You cannot touch it. It's energy, but it's not physical. What's interesting on a quantum level is that what makes up physical stuff is exactly the same stuff that makes up light. In fact, Bohm famously said that matter is frozen light. Now, matter is actually the same light, but has a slight twist to it. So instead of a simple wave, it has like a rolling twist. And it's been shown experimentally, if you just untwist the kink in what makes up matter, it instantly becomes light and goes at the speed of light and has no mass. And it instantly becomes everywhere because it doesn't experience time or separation. So essentially, even the physical body that you have, it's just a temporary twist that makes it seem localized and physical and subject to entropy. But actually, it's made of the same fundamental stuff as light. And light exists essentially at the boundary outside of space and time, which is eternal and ever present. So hopefully that gives an answer.
Okay, and we
that
need to
is
stop
part of the
here
book.
'cause,
Yes.
yeah, Mark has a physics background, and I suspect you guys could talk about this for hours. But people are asking, Alex, what's your website and when will your book come out?
Well, the plan is for the book to come out in the summer. So hopefully we're 6 months away from that. And the best way to reach me at the moment is probably my website, which is vrinconsciousness.com. That's the actual model of reality that appears to be the most parsimonious, best fit for all the data. That our reality is like a VR in consciousness. So that's just the website, vrinconsciousness.com.
Beautiful, thank you. And for those of you who are signed up for the Soul Proof and Soul Phone newsletters, we'll be announcing when Alex's book is out and how it's available. Well, thank you very much. This just warms my heart to talk about all these things. Awesome job.
Thank you so much,
again.
everyone.
All right, yeah. Yeah, send him the love. So, we've gone way over, but we're still going to have sharing sessions for those who want to do that. But if you have to leave, we understand. So here's a bit of a close to this meeting before we have the sharing sessions. First of all, we hope you'll join us and bring a friend at the next meeting, which is Tuesday, March 10th, 8 p.m. Eastern, to hear our guest speaker, Reverend Sue Frederick. She's a lifelong intuitive, ordained unity minister, master numerologist, and soul regression therapist. She's the author of books Angel Up, The Angel's Guide to Ascension, Through a Divine Lens, and others. Remember that you can send follow-up questions, no charge. I'll answer. I'll give you personalized recommendations. Mark@soulproof.com. If you need anything else to optimally heal, live, and help others in our world. So, God bless and let it shine. Now.